Good morning, students. We've been looking that from the three orders, we see that the European civilization was actually coming out of the medieval times of the 11th century and 12th century and 13th century, and it was now entering an urban phase whereby more and more towns had started developing, more and more people had started migrating from the villages and to the manorial states to these towns because there were more opportunities, working opportunities, more earning, and also the most important fact that you do not necessarily had to be employed in agriculture, because now you could have different choices in terms of, I won't use the word career here, but just to make your livelihood, you had more choices than just agriculture. You could get into trading, you could get into schools, you could get into universities. Now there was so much that was happening around, so you do not necessarily had to be a 10-year-old peasant, and you did not necessarily have to be a 12-year-old agricultural labor. You could go to schools, you could go to decent colleges, and the whole society was opening up. Not, I would not again say that people were getting equal and that this message of equality was spreading, but definitely now the whole new world was opening up, and the exploration of this new fascinating world, whereby people did not have time to actually wonder and worry about the equality part of it. Everyone was just trying to find a place for himself. Okay, so the revival of Italian cities after the fall of Western Roman Empire, many of the towns that had been political and cultural centers in Italy fell into ruin. Naturally, those were the days of glory and the years of glory. And once the Roman civilization was gone, definitely most of the activities which previously existed and ceased to exist. So, naturally, once it gets into disuse, it falls into ruin. So, for quite a few centuries, all these places which once had seen the great days of glory fell into ruin and disuse, and but now it was a time for their revival. There was no unified government, and the Pope in Rome, who was a sovereign of his in his own state, was not a strong political figure. But this is all before 12th and 13th century. While Western, that is the period between the dilution of the Roman Empire and the 13th and the 12th century, before clergy became important. While Western Europe was being reshaped by feudal bonds and unified under the Latin Church, the Eastern Europe, under the Byzantine Empire and Islam, was creating a common civilization further west. Italy was weak and fragmented. However, it was these very developments that developed in the revival of Italian culture. With the expansion of trade between the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic countries, the ports on the Italian coast revived. From the 12th century, as the Mongols opened up trade with China via the Silk Route, guys, 12th century, we are now entering, because you have to understand, this was a time when the glory of Genghis Khan was at its zenith. And you remember, Genghis Khan died in 1227 AD. So naturally, this was a period of the glory of Genghis Khan. So there was enormous amount of trade happening. There was enormous amount of traveling which was happening. Sometimes the traders were moving into vast areas. Sometimes the Mongol army were traveling hundreds and thousands of kilometers into different areas. Exploration was on. Everyone was literally out doing something or the other. So naturally, those trading routes and those trading ports, all of them now saw a revival. And as the trade with Western countries also increased, Italian towns played a central role. They no longer saw themselves as part of the guys. This map is an important one. I told this yesterday as well, so please do keep this in mind. They no longer saw themselves as part of the powerful empire, but as independent city-states. Two of these, Florence and Venice, were republics, and many others were court cities ruled by princes. Guys, republic, as you understand what it is that the people play the most important role and not the rulers. One of the most vibrant cities was Venice, another was Genoa. They were different from other parts of Europe. The clergy were not very politically dominant here, nor were there powerful feudal lords. Rich merchants and bankers actively participated in governing the city, and this helped the idea of citizenship to strike root. Even when these towns were ruled by military despots, the pride felt by the town people in being citizens did not weaken. So essentially, the affairs of these cities were managed by the people themselves. There was no king of Venice or king of Florence or king of Genoa. They were independent city states which were managed by the councillors, managed by the where the people actually participated on their own. The traders used to manage it, manage their own internal affairs, the revenue, all of that was, and that's a reason why the people, the citizens of these cities felt enormously proud of themselves. Yeah, that they were unique in a lot of ways, and that is why, because they had such an enormous amount of pride and also the sentimental attachment to these cities, that they contributed enormously to the well-being and the glory of these cities, whether through architecture, art, patronizing great artists, some of the greatest artists who ever were there, who were ever known to be born. All of them were patronized by the city councils and the rich citizens of these three towns. And today, the European art, the world art, and craft and architecture owes a tremendous amount of thankfulness to the citizens of these three places, that is Venice, Genoa, and Florence. The city state. The city state Cardinal Contrari writes about the democratic government of his city state in the Commonwealth of the Government of Venice in 1534. To come to the institution of a Venetian Commonwealth, the whole authority of the city is in that council, into which all the gentlemen of the city, being once past the age of 25 years, are admitted. So you can understand, there was no sense of privilege that you had to be from a certain section of the society, or you had to have a certain amount of wealth that you could show, and only then you would have you would get the admission to be the member of these councils. No, it was not at all. You just, there was no discrimination about being rich and poor. If you were 25 years and above age, you could do something and you could contribute to the glory of these cities. Now, these were the concepts which were way ahead of their times. If you remember, you have studied French Revolution in class 9 and 10. You have surely studied how difficult it was for the humble sections of the society to participate in the political and social affairs of the country. Universities and humanism. The earliest universities in Europe had been set up in Italian towns. Not surprising. The universities of Padua and Bologna had been centers of legal studies from the 11th century. Commerce being the chief activity in the city, there was an increasing demand for lawyers and notaries, a combination of solicitor and record keeper, to write and interpret rules and written agreements, without which trade on a large scale was not possible. Law was therefore a popular subject of study, but there was now a shift in emphasis. It was studied in the context of earlier Roman culture. Francesco Petrarch represented this change. To Petrarch, antiquity was a distinctive civilization, which could be best understood through the actual words of the ancient Greeks and Romans. He therefore stressed the importance of a close reading of ancient authors. So, naturally, students, people were not in a hurry to disown their past or their history. Now, people wanted to, because they could see that there was so much that could be learned from whatever their forefathers had done earlier, whether in terms of architecture, in terms of engineering, in terms of art, in terms of science, all of that, medicine. So everything that was past was not to be debunked, but definitely to be embraced and there were a lot of good things that could be taken out, and they could build on that with the new technology which was coming up every day from different parts of Europe. Um, this educational program implied that there was much to be learned which religious teachings alone could not give. So, naturally, now science and technology was taking in. Guys, you have to understand technology does not necessarily, when you see computers and smartphone, then you think it's technology, right? Anything that facilitates your life, makes it simpler, is technology. 500 years ago, whatever they had, today you might see them as something very very ancient and coming from stone age, but for them in 15th century, that was the latest technology. Similarly, once you are in, say, 20, today we are in 2020, once we are in 2050, the people of that generation, 2050 and 2060, if they find out that we used to carry smartphones with something which we are so proud of, they might consider that to be an extremely stone age and an antiquated technology. They would think that why do you have to carry such a bulky device, which you think is very lightweight, of course, but a bulky device in your pocket, which is so inconvenient, you can lose it. Why do you have to carry laptops? Okay, 30 years ago, people were carrying such bulky laptops. Achha, you had to charge them. Now, it's a similar fashion. They can. You were driving exhaust cars. Your cars used to give out smoke. Come on, that has to be a very very old technology, because by 2050, probably all the cars are being battery driven, electricity charged. You never know, being driven by water. So eh, for any generation, but for you and I, we live in the most modern and the most technologically advanced period of our times. So this is what I am just trying to tell you, that the whole world was opening, and people were embracing their past as well, and they understood that now it could not be just what the religion was telling you. Because students, just to give you a very basic kind of an idea, that by around this time, the 12th century, 13th century, for hundreds of years, European civilization always felt that Earth was the center of our solar system. Today, of course, it was. We understood that when Nicholas Copernicus, you would probably, I don't know if you study here, Nicholas Copernicus was the first one, European, who said that in 15th century, that is, that Earth was the center of the solar system, and all the planets moved around Sun, and it was not that that the Earth was the center of solar system. Because in the early times, the church used to say that Earth was the center of solar system, and because the gods used to live on Earth, and there was so much saints and angels, they used to live on Earth. And that is the reason why the sun and different planets moved around Earth. But this theory, and this was something which was a prevalent idea for centuries. It was only by 15th century that Nicholas Copernicus came up with all those mathematical formulas and diagrams, and proved it, that it is not possible that Earth be the center of the solar system, and then you have the duration of days and nights and seasons, and the sun rising in the east and setting in the west. All of that would not be possible if Earth was the center. And that's how he proved it mathematically and also by logic. So in terms of not just that the new technology was coming up, but also the new ideas were being born, the old ideas were being debunked and being thrown and thrashed if they did not stand the test of time or logic. So whole of this was changing. So people did not have actually time to worry about who has more money, who has less money, because the whole society was now being flushed with interesting and path breaking and revolutionary ideas. Thank you.